The rain was relentless now, slamming against the windshield in a steady, rhythmic drum that seemed almost deafening in the quiet of the car. The wipers moved back and forth, sweeping the droplets aside, but the view outside was blurred, distorted, as if the world itself had become a watercolor painting smeared by the storm. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was thick, not just with the humidity of the rain, but with the quiet tension that neither Richard nor Emma had yet spoken aloud. Emma's fingers were curled tightly in her lap, her coat slightly damp from the brief moments she had lingered outside. Her chest was heavy, her heartbeat erratic. She could feel it, the storm outside reflecting the storm inside, the conflict of emotions, the surge of feelings she was trying so desperately to suppress. She told herself she needed to focus on the road ahead, on her home, on Daniel, but she couldn't. Not when Richard was sitting there beside her, the subtle power of his presence filling every corner of the small car cabin. Richard's hands were steady on the wheel, his posture composed, almost statuesque. And yet, there was something different in his voice, a softening when he spoke that night. "You know," he began, his eyes momentarily glancing toward her, "sometimes the night makes things clearer, or at least more intense. Thoughts you keep hidden in the daytime have a way of surfacing when it's quiet like this." Emma's gaze remained fixed on the rain-slicked streets ahead, but her mind spun with every word. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "I suppose that's true. There's a strange honesty that comes with the night. No distractions, no expectations, just you and your thoughts." Richard's eyes returned fully to the road, but his hands tightened ever so slightly on the steering wheel. "Exactly. That's what I mean. And sometimes the night can be revealing, dangerous even." The word hung in the air, and Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. She didn't turn to look at him, yet she was painfully aware of the subtle shift in his tone, the quiet intensity that threaded through his words. Something had changed since the meeting, since the conversation they had shared earlier. The polite, formal boundaries that had existed between them were fraying, and in their place was something dangerously compelling, a connection she hadn't anticipated, one that made her pulse race and her stomach twist in unexpected ways. A while they drove in silence, the car cocooned in the storm outside. Emma's thoughts wandered, oscillating between guilt and curiosity, longing and restraint. Why am I so aware of him? She asked herself. Why do I feel like the world has shrunk to just this car, this rain, and Richard Collins? Her mind drifted back to earlier in the evening, to the fleeting glance during the meeting when Richard's eyes had lingered on her. Not in judgment, but in recognition. It had been subtle, easily missed by anyone else, but she had felt it, deep in her chest. And now, hours later, alone in the car with him, the weight of that unspoken acknowledgement pressed heavily on her. Richard broke the silence again, his voice lower this time, almost hesitant. "Emma, do you ever feel trapped in your own life? Not physically, but emotionally? Like everyone expects you to be a certain way, and no one notices what's underneath?" Emma's fingers fidgeted with the edge of her coat. Her mind suddenly flooded with memories and emotions she hadn't let herself feel in months. "Yes, I think we all feel that way sometimes. I do. And I think the worst part is pretending it's not true. Pretending everything is fine when it isn't." Richard's eyes flicked toward her briefly, and she caught the softening in his expression, the vulnerability he rarely showed anyone. "I know that feeling," he admitted. "Being in charge, being expected to have all the answers. It leaves little room for mistakes, for doubts, for human emotions." Emma's breath caught. She had never heard him speak like this before. Never so openly. There was an intimacy to his words, an honesty that made her heart race. She wanted to respond, to tell him she understood, that she too carried doubts and fears and unspoken desires. But the words felt stuck in her throat, fragile and dangerous. The car turned down a quieter street, the rain forming puddles along the edges of the asphalt. Emma noticed how the headlights reflected off Richard's face, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the gentle crease of his brow, and the intensity in his eyes. She was aware of him in a way she had never been. Aware of anyone not Daniel, not her friends, not even herself. Every subtle movement, every quiet word seemed amplified, drawing her attention and stirring emotions she wasn't ready to confront. Richard cleared his throat again. "Emma, I shouldn't say this. I really shouldn't. But tonight, sitting here, driving you home, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Something complicated. Something I shouldn't feel." Her chest tightened at his words, and she turned her gaze fully toward him, even though her mind screamed at her to look away. "Richard, we shouldn't," she started, her voice trembling slightly. But he interrupted gently, not with words, but with the soft intensity of his eyes, holding her in a silent pause that left her breathless. The car seemed to shrink around them. The outside world, the rain, the city, the noise fading into insignificance. All that remained was the hum of the engine, the rhythmic beat of the wipers, and the unspoken storm between them. Emma's heart was pounding so loudly she thought he might hear it. She was acutely aware of every detail. The subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth of the car, the faint tension in his posture, the way his hands gripped the wheel just slightly tighter when he spoke. Her mind raced, filled with conflicting thoughts. This is dangerous. This is forbiddance. He's Daniel's boss. I'm married. She reminded herself of these truths repeatedly, trying to anchor herself in reality. And yet, the pull she felt toward him was undeniable, magnetic, and terrifyingly irresistible. Richard spoke again, softly, almost a whisper meant only for her ears. "Emma, do you ever feel like life has trapped you into a role? Like people see you as one thing and forget there's more, deeper than what's visible?" Emma swallowed hard, feeling the intensity of his gaze even though she refused to meet it. "Yes, more than I can explain. People expect you to be strong, composed, perfect. And sometimes it's exhausting to keep pretending that you are." He nodded slowly, as if she had given voice to thoughts he himself had long kept buried. "Exactly. And sometimes when someone notices, truly notices, it can be overwhelming. It can stir things you didn't expect." Emma's mind reeled. She could feel the weight of his words pressing against the walls she had carefully built around herself. She wanted to speak, to say something that might break the tension, but fear and desire tangled together, leaving her silent. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, chaotic, relentless, and impossible to ignore. The car slowed as they approached a particularly sharp bend in the road. Emma instinctively leaned back, her hands gripping her lap. Richard's eyes flicked to hers, and for the briefest moment, the world seemed suspended. The rain, the road, the night, they all disappeared, leaving only the raw, fragile tension between them. He cleared his throat again. "Emma, I don't know where this is going or what will happen, but tonight, I feel something real, something I can't ignore." Her heart raced. The rational part of her screamed to resist, to ground herself in reality. But the emotional, unspoken part, the part she didn't dare admit, wanted to reach out, to close the distance between them, to acknowledge the connection that had sparked and grown during this short drive. She finally spoke, her voice barely audible over the rain. Richard, I feel it too. But we can't. We shouldn't. His eyes softened, a mixture of longing, regret, and something deeper flickering across his face. I know, he said quietly, his voice trembling with the weight of unspoken emotions. And yet, here we are. For a moment neither moved. The storm outside continued unabated, the rain hammering the windshield, the wipers slicing through the sheets of water. Inside the car, time seemed suspended. Two people, caught between desire and restraint, between duty and longing, shared a fragile, intimate moment that neither could fully define or resist. And then, slowly, inevitably, the car continued down the street. The storm would pass, the ride would end, and the world outside would return. But the storm inside, the connection, the longing, the unspoken tension would not disappear. It had been awakened, fragile yet undeniable, and neither Emma nor Richard could ignore it any longer. By the time they were a few blocks from her house, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle. The world outside seemed ordinary again, but Emma's heart was anything but. She realized that nothing about this night, this drive, would ever feel ordinary again. She opened the car door, stepping into the wet night, her chest still pounding. She turned to Richard, her voice trembling. This can't happen. He nodded, his eyes soft but heavy with unspoken longing. I know, he whispered. And yet, as she walked up to her porch, both of them understood. Everything had changed. The hum of the car was almost hypnotic. The low sound of the engine vibrating beneath them as the city lights flickered past the windshield. Rain had begun to fall steadily now, drumming a gentle rhythm against the glass. Emma Parker stared out. The window, her thoughts a chaotic swirl of fatigue, curiosity, and something else she couldn't yet name. Something warm, tingling, and confusing, an awareness of Richard Collins that felt entirely new and deeply unsettling. For a while, they drove in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Emma's mind replayed the meeting over and over. The confident faces around the table, Daniel's unshakable poise, the way Richard had watched her at one point, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet appreciation. She had barely noticed it at the time. But now, alone in the car, it seemed magnified. Every glance, every subtle smile, every gesture suddenly felt significant. Richard, on the other hand, was carefully composed. He drove with a steady hand, eyes occasionally flicking to Emma, as if measuring her mood, searching for something he didn't dare name. The air in the car was heavy, not with discomfort, but with a tension that hummed just beneath the surface, unspoken and potent. Finally, Richard broke the silence, his voice soft and measured, almost hesitant. You don't usually come to these late meetings, do you? Emma shook her head, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her coat. No. Daniel thought it would be good for me to see how things work. Honestly, I felt a little out of place. Richard's lips curved into a faint smile, subtle yet somehow disarming. Out of place? Not at all. You brought a calmness to the room. Your presence didn't go unnoticed. The compliment hit Emma harder than she expected. She wasn't used to praise from Richard, and hearing it directly, in this quiet, intimate setting, made her chest tighten. She dared a glance at him, hoping to read the expression behind those steady eyes. There was nothing harsh or calculating. There, just a quiet attentiveness, a calm focus that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. She cleared her throat. Thank you. I just hoped I wasn't distracting anyone. Distracting, he repeated, his voice low, almost incredulous. On the contrary, I think sometimes people forget that perspective, calm observation, and honesty are rare gifts in a room full of noise. You have them. Emma felt her cheeks warm. She didn't know how to respond, so she stayed silent, letting the words settle like a fragile, unexpected treasure. She hadn't anticipated this. She had thought this ride would be simple. Leave the office, sit quietly, arrive home. But now, every word between them seemed weighted, carrying an invisible charge. A silence fell again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, filled with the quiet hum of possibility and the gentle rhythm of falling rain. Emma's eyes drifted to the window, watching the streetlights reflect on the wet asphalt. Her thoughts were scattered, fragmented. Why am I feeling this? Why does every glance from him make my heart skip? Richard, meanwhile, seemed to navigate the silence with intention, his gaze occasionally flicking to her. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper meant for no one but her. You know, sometimes I wonder if people really see me, or if they only see the title I carry. Being the boss. It makes it hard to be understood. Emma turned slightly toward him, her curiosity piqued. She could hear the lowliness in his words, a subtle vulnerability that didn't match the stern, commanding figure everyone in the office knew. I think people see more than they admit, she said softly. Sometimes they're just too afraid to say it. For a brief moment their eyes met. Emma's heart raced. It was such a fleeting connection, just a glance, but it felt monumental. A silent acknowledgement of something neither of them had the words to describe. Richard looked back at the road, composed once more, but the tension lingered. Heavy and undeniable. Emma felt herself leaning slightly forward, drawn in by the warmth in his tone, the depth behind his eyes. She tried to steady her racing heart, reminding herself that he was her husband's boss, a man she respected, and a man she shouldn't be thinking about this way. But the tension was intoxicating. The car passed through a stretch of empty streets, the rain intensifying. The wipers moved rhythmically, almost in sync with the rapid beat of Emma's heart. She realized she was acutely aware of Richard in every detail. The subtle crease of his brow, the way his fingers rested lightly on the steering wheel, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the dampness in the car. Every subtle movement drew her attention, made her feel something she couldn't name. Richard cleared his throat, breaking the spell. Daniel is lucky to have someone like you. Emma's heart lurched. That simple statement hit harder than she expected. Daniel rarely said such things aloud, and here was his boss, someone whose opinion she hadn't even considered personally, telling her she was valued, admired. She wanted to respond, to say thank you, but the words lodged in her throat. Richard continued, his voice softer, almost hesitant. Some men don't realize what they have until it's gone. But you're someone they should never take for granted. Emma's pulse quickened. Her chest felt tight, her thoughts spinning. Was he speaking about Daniel? Or was there something deeper hidden in his tone? Something she wasn't meant to hear? The air in the car seemed heavier, charged, with unspoken possibility. She looked away, focusing on the rain streaking down the window, trying to ground herself. She reminded herself repeatedly, she was married. She loved Daniel. Nothing could or should happen. And yet, as Richard glanced at her, there was a moment, just a flicker, where their eyes locked again. In that brief moment, the world seemed to shrink. It was just the two of them, alone in the car, the hum of the engine and the rain providing the only soundtrack. The silence was no longer empty, it was intimate, almost confessional. Richard's voice broke the silence again, gentler. This time, Emma, do you ever feel unseen? Not just in your work or by those around you, but truly seen. By someone who understands, without judgment. Emma's throat went dry. The question was deeply personal, unexpected, and it resonated with a part of her she hadn't admitted even to herself. She swallowed, choosing her words carefully. Yes, sometimes. It's rare, though. Most people are too busy or too caught up in their own world. He nodded, as if validating her unspoken thoughts. Exactly. That's how it feels sometimes. To be the one everyone notices but no one truly sees. I think we all crave someone who sees us for who we are, not just the roles we play. Emma felt a lump in her throat, a strange mixture of empathy and desire stirring inside her. His words were carefully phrased, gentle, yet they cut through the protective walls she always maintained. She realized that, in this moment, she was listening, not just to the words, but to the person behind them. A man who was composed, controlled, and yet undeniably human. Vulnerable, even. The car slipped through another intersection, the streets, slick with rain. Emma's mind was racing. Why am I feeling this? Why do his words affect me so deeply? Richard spoke again, almost in a whisper, as if sharing a secret meant only for her. I don't usually say things like this, but tonight, with you here, I feel something different. Something I haven't felt in a long time. Emma's chest tightened. The words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. She felt a pull toward him, magnetic and forbidden. She knew she should look away. She knew she should remind herself of Daniel, but she couldn't. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, everything else, the rain, the road, the city faded away. They drove in silence for several minutes after that, each lost in thought, each aware of the unspoken tension between them. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her mind spinning with confusion, guilt, and curiosity. She was terrified of the feelings that were rising inside her feelings. She hadn't anticipated and couldn't easily dismiss. Finally, the car slowed as they approached her neighborhood. The familiar sight of streetlights, houses, and her own driveway seemed to ground her, yet it didn't diminish the electricity lingering in the car. Emma opened the door, rain drizzling onto her coat. She turned to Richard, her voice quiet but firm. Richard, this can't happen. His eyes softened, filled with a mixture of longing and regret. I know, he said simply. And yet, in that charged moment, both of them knew something had changed. Nothing had happened. No words beyond polite conversation. No gestures beyond fleeting glances. But everything had shifted. The quiet car ride had become a crucible, revealing feelings neither of them were prepared to confront, and setting the stage for an emotional storm neither could ignore. Emma walked up to her porch, heart still pounding, mind a tangle of thoughts. She paused for a moment, glancing back at Richard. Their eyes met one last time before she entered her house. A silent acknowledgement that this night, this ride, had left an indelible mark on both of them. And as the door closed behind her, Emma knew with a strange certainty, this was only the beginning. The conference room was buzzing with the usual post-meeting chatter, half-hearted laughter, the clicking of keyboards, and the shuffling of papers. Emma Parker sat quietly in the far corner, her notebook open but largely ignored. She had attended the late evening meeting mostly because Daniel had insisted. He had said it would be a good opportunity for her to understand the inner workings of his company, to see how decisions were made, and perhaps even feel more connected to his world she only glimpsed through his hurried updates at dinner. But now, as the clock ticked past 9, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was out of place. The room was filled with men and women discussing quarterly reports, marketing strategies, and client issues. Everyone seemed confident, assured, and articulate, everyone except her. She tapped her pen nervously against her notebook, trying to focus on the words that seemed to flow over her like a flood. But it was difficult. The exhaustion from a long day at work, combined with her own insecurities, weighed heavily on her. Daniel, as usual, was in the middle of it all effortlessly. Charming, giving his ideas with ease, his voice confident but not overbearing. Emma loved him deeply, but she often wondered if she would ever be able to keep up in his world. The corporate world, the world of ambition and influence he navigated daily. Halfway through the meeting, Daniel had whispered to her across the table, his expression apologetic. "Emma, I need to stay behind for a client discussion. The meeting might run a little longer. Are you okay?" She had nodded, trying to hide the flutter of disappointment in her chest. "Of course, I'll manage." But as the meeting drew to a close, she realized just how much she had underestimated her fatigue. The hallways were dimly lit, echoing with the hurried footsteps of colleagues leaving for the night. Her coat felt heavier than usual as she wrapped it around her shoulders, the cool air brushing against her cheeks as she stepped out. The city was quiet, the usual hum of traffic softened by the late hour. And that's when she heard it, a calm, deliberate voice that seemed to slice through the emptiness of the hallway. "Emma, it's too late for you to catch the train. Let me drive you home." Emma turned sharply, startled. Her heart skipped a beat. The man standing there was Richard Collins, her husband's boss, a figure she had only interacted with formally before. He was tall, with broad shoulders, a commanding presence, and a calm confidence that seemed to fill the space around him. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his eyes, piercing yet thoughtful, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her momentarily forget where she was. Richard Collins was known in the office as someone who rarely showed vulnerability. He was respected, sometimes feared, and never underestimated. Emma had always found him intriguing, though she would have never admitted it aloud. And now, here he was, offering her a ride home. Emma hesitated, unsure what to say. She knew Danielle would have been uncomfortable with this, yet she also knew she couldn't walk home or catch a late train at this hour. She nodded, her voice slightly shaky. "Thank you, Mr. Collins. I mean, Richard." He gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Please, call me Richard." The ease in his voice was disarming, and Emma felt a strange mix of gratitude and nervousness. They walked together to the sleek black car parked just outside the building. The city lights glinted against its polished surface, reflecting the dim glow of the street lamps. Emma opened the passenger door and slid in, her hands brushing against the leather seat, feeling the coolness against her fingertips. As Richard started the engine, a comfortable silence fell between them. The hum of the car was the only sound. As they merged onto the highway, Emma's thoughts raced. What was she feeling? Gratitude? Nervousness? Or something more complicated, something she wasn't ready to name? Richard glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable but calm. "You don't usually attend these late meetings, do you?" Emma shook her head, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "No. Daniel thought it would be good for me to see how things work. Honestly, I felt a little out of place." Richard's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Out of place? Not at all. You brought a calmness to the room. Your presence didn't go unnoticed." Emma's breath caught. Compliments from Richard Collins were rare, thoughtful, unusually calculated. Hearing it directed at her felt almost surreal. She turned slightly to look at him, trying to read the emotions flickering behind his composed exterior, but his eyes stayed focused on the road. For a few miles, the silence returned, punctuated only by the occasional traffic noise and the soft of the car's engine. Emma felt an odd comfort in the stillness, a feeling she hadn't expected. There was something grounding about Richard's presence, even if it also made her heart race. Then, as they drove under the glow of a streetlight, Richard spoke again, his voice softer this time. You know, sometimes I wonder if people really see me, or if they only see the title I carry. Being the boss makes it difficult to be understood. Emma turned slightly, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. She could feel a pang of empathy deep in her chest. I think people see more than they admit, she said gently. Sometimes they're just too afraid to say it. Richard's eyes met hers briefly, a spark of something unspoken passing between them before he looked back at the road. Emma's pulse quickened. This was dangerous territory. She reminded herself that he was her husband's boss, someone she should respect, admire from afar, and certainly not feel drawn to. And yet, the atmosphere in the car shifted, subtle but undeniable. Every glance, every word, every shared silence seemed to carry a weight far beyond casual conversation. Emma found herself noticing small things, the way Richard's hand rested lightly on the steering wheel, the slight crease of concern between his brows, the steady rhythm of his breathing. She was hyper-aware of him, and it made her heart race. City lights blurred past as the car glided along the road. Emma's mind wandered, imagining what it would be like if circumstances were different. If this ride were not just a necessity, but a choice made in a world where they were equals, not divided by professional and personal boundaries. The thought startled her, and she quickly tried to push it away, focusing instead on the passing streetlights and the sound of rain beginning to patter against the windshield. Richard glanced at her again, almost imperceptibly, and asked, "Do you enjoy evenings like this? Quiet, with nothing but your thoughts?" Emma paused, considering her answer. "Sometimes," she admitted, "though it's rare these days. Life is busy. Always moving, always something demanding attention." He nodded, as if understanding completely. "Yes, sometimes it feels like we're just drifting along, missing the moments that matter." Emma felt a sudden, unexpected connection. A bond formed in the simple, quiet honesty of the conversation. She realized, with a mixture of fear and curiosity, that this drive, this ordinary, late-night ride had become something extraordinary. The miles slipped by almost unnoticed. Emma's thoughts were a jumble of emotions: confusion, attraction, guilt, and fascination. She reminded herself over and over. She was married to Daniel. Richard Collins was her husband's boss. Nothing could or should happen here. And yet, there was a spark of fleeting, almost forbidden electricity in the air that neither of them could ignore. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A quiet tension, a silent acknowledgement that tonight, something had shifted, even if they didn't yet understand how. As the city lights gave way to the softer glow of suburban streets, Emma realized she was acutely aware of every detail. The steady cadence of Richard's voice, the way his eyes reflected the streetlights, the gentle hum of the engine, even the faint scent of his cologne, subtle but intoxicating. Her pulse raced, her mind spun, and her heart felt both heavy and light at the same time. By the time they were a few blocks from her house, Emma knew that this ride had changed something fundamental. Nothing had happened, nothing had been said, beyond polite conversation, but everything felt different. She glanced at Richard once more, catching a flicker of something. Was it longing? Curiosity? In his eyes before he returned his focus to the road. She stepped out of the car, her heart still pounding, the night air crisp against her cheeks. "Thank you for the ride," she murmured, almost shyly. Richard nodded, his expression unreadable. But she could sense the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them. "Take care, Emma." And as she walked up to her porch, the world seemed simultaneously ordinary and surreal. She had been driven home by her husband's boss, a simple act that should have been mundane. But the emotions, the unspoken tension, and the subtle connection between them lingered. Unshakable. Emma knew one thing for certain. This night, this ride, would stay with her. And she couldn't yet predict how it would ripple through her heart, or through her life.